George, host of the Locked On Kings podcast, joining us here on D-Lo and KC, brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil. Matt, it's a day that few other teams in the league care about. Lottery Day Eve.
Ooh, our Disneyland.
It's our Disneyland,
or it's our what's the place they went to in National Lampoon Vacation? What's the amusement park they were trying to get to that was closed? Like
Wally World?
Yeah, it's not always our Disneyland. It's not the happiest place on earth. It could be Wally World where it's closed. We don't get nothing, and it's just a bad experience.
Yeah, I think we get there and the lines are long and the food is bad and the kid throws up on us. Like that's normally what Lottery Day is.
Yeah, but Kenny, every single one has the potential of being our Disneyland. That's the thing. You could sell me on the percentages. I'm a gambling man all of a sudden when it comes to lottery time. No, I hate that this matters so much every single year, but damn it, it's content, and I welcome it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. As it's content and it's optimism and it's hope that things will turn around, that the lottery balls will finally bounce our way, and maybe this time we'll get the pick right. But the draft lottery is tomorrow. I know you've spent a lot of time talking about that. Have you really dove into the picks? Like if the Kings, I know we had some fun with a recent episode about what if the Kings get number one, what do you do in that situation? And Kenny and I have often talked about what happens if, the Kings move up in the lottery. Does that make the pick more attractive to keep or more attractive to trade? But have you thought about good old 7, 8? What happens if that's where the Kings are drafting?
Honestly, when it comes to actual draft talent, outside of the top 4, maybe top 5 guys, I haven't paid attention at all because I am under the assumption, plus conversations that I've had, I'm under the belief that even if the Kings win the lottery, there's a high likelihood of this pick being moved. And D'Lo, you and I discussed that it becomes harder to move the pick if it's number 1 overall because the expectation of the value that you're getting back is higher and therefore there's less deals to be out there. I honestly believe if the Kings stay at 7, I think there are going to be a ton of deals out there for them. They might not be good deals, but I think there are going to be a ton of deals out there for them and tons of possibility of what they can do with number 7 overall. But obviously with number 1, 2, 3, or 4, which again, that's the highest they can move up. They can't get 5 or 6. Then they can get great value for those picks. It's just a little more difficult to move on from them. But in terms of draft talent, I have thought about, and I'm actually dropping a podcast later on today after I'm done with you gentlemen, talking about if the Kings did get number 1 overall, if they were to pick a player, who would they consider? And I threw that out there on social media today. And it was kind of a 50-50 split. There were some other names in there, but mainly it was Chet versus Jabari. That's what I saw basically. It was between those two. And what I thought was interesting there is those are 2 top of the draft talents that you could argue are number 1 overall picks who also fit needs for the Sacramento Kings. So that's kind of a win in its own right. So if the Kings move up into the top 3 even, I think they're in a really, really good spot. The odds are that they're going to stay around 7 or could even, knock on wood, drop to 8 or 9. And even so, that pick plus a player or 2 on this roster, or Rashaan Holmes, maybe even a Harrison Barnes, I think that can get Monte McNair some nice value as well.
What do you think that can get you though? Because I'm of the same belief. I'm the one that said, hey, move on from the pick if you have to. I'm not worried about this year's first round pick. I'm not worried about next year's first round pick. Move them both if you need to, but do I want to do all that for Tobias Harris? You know what I mean? Do I want to do all that for Julius Randle? Do I want to do that for John? I like those guys. I do. But at what point are those offers on the table not good enough to move on from a top 10 pick in this draft for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I have direct names to answer your question, a name that's brought up maybe too much, and it's one of the hot names out there that could be acquirable is John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks, right? Could the Kings find a way to move 7? And I imagine if I'm Atlanta, I'm saying, well, if we also want Harrison Barnes as part of that deal, or they want a player of that caliber as part of that deal. And I don't know if the Kings say yes to that. I don't think the Kings would necessarily have to trade a lottery pick and Harrison Barnes, but I don't know, maybe I'm undervaluing John Collins a little bit. But ultimately, Kenny, if I'm McNair, I'm calling a bunch of teams, or I'm fielding a bunch of offers, and I'm looking at established talent. What I'm trying to do either with my pick or with trading the pick is to fill either that starting 2 hole or fill that, I think, bigger starting 4 hole. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for at that point in time. I don't know what players are out there that are realistically available. The player that the Kings are looking for, that scoring, floor spacing, but also help on defense, rim protecting big, those are pretty few and far between and are hot commodities around the league. So I don't know how realistic it is for the Kings to be able to pry one of them away for just the 7th pick and filler, essentially. But ultimately, McNair, in my opinion, is looking for talent that is helping this team win right away. And the likelihood of a proven NBA commodity or a couple of proven NBA commodities that might not be as good or have as high of a ceiling as a 7th overall pick could, but are proven rotational NBA players that fill needs with this Kings team. I think that's more valuable to the Kings trying to get better and win as early as next year versus, hey, here's a rookie that could be great, but we're on the timeline of a 25, soon to be 26-year-old Fox and a 26, soon to be 27-year-old Domantas Sabonis. Not that that's a massive age gap, but those two guys are looking to win right away versus a rookie deserves time to be brought along a little bit.
Right.
James has talked about this on numerous occasions over the course of the last week and some change with us, and of course Sam Amick wrote about it today in The Athletic. But what's your feel right now for Monte McNair's contract status, or in I guess in Monte McNair's case, his lack of contract status?
Yeah, I think it's dumb. Like, I don't necessarily believe that McNair automatically deserves to be extended through the length of Mike Brown's contract, because I mean, a 4-year extension, if you're getting more years than you got initially, but you haven't really done anything yet. Like, I understand that that's a little bit of a stretch, but to me, like, Monte McNair's contract status should be on par with Domantas Sabonis. Like, that's how it's always been for me. Is in my mind, Monte McNair has 2 years or deserves the next 2 years to try and make things work and get Domantas Sabonis to re-sign, or worst case scenario, try and trade Sabonis if you know he's walking and get some good value in return. And hopefully you're fielding a playoff team at that point in time. If you're not, then you're gone. Like that was the risk he took when he traded away Tyrese Halliburton. And I think he knew that. So the possibility of the Sacramento Kings firing Monte McNair or not bringing him back after this season, even if the Kings miss the playoffs and are disappointments again, that possibility I think is absurd and I think would be foolish by the Kings, because then for the 3rd time in the Vivek Ranadive era, you would be going into another general manager hiring with a head coach already selected with a multi-year deal. Like, it happened to Mike Malone, it happened to Luke Walton, then it would be Mike Brown, like 3 times in a row in 9 or 10 years. And I'm not trying to make this a Vivek thing. I'm just saying the Vivek era. Like, that's a bad pattern. I understand you don't just keep people around for the sake of keeping people around, but at some point you need to have some stability. And for a first-time general manager only getting 3 years, pulling off one of the best trades in Kings history, which I know it's a low bar, or one of the better trades in terms of names, it hasn't really panned out yet. And for having, I think, 2 successful drafts, like, I think he absolutely deserves to, if nothing else, be extended through the next 2 years. He gets 1 more year on top of that to see what happens with Sabonis.
So I'm trying to figure out, the timeline of that. Should that have all been taken care of, in your opinion, before the coaching search? Like at the end of the year? And which is kind of the optics would be kind of iffy, you know what I mean? But I would understand why they're doing it. But season's over. Kings missed the playoffs for the 16th consecutive year. Hey, we're signing Monte McNair to a 2-year extension.
30 wins. Congrats, buddy.
Is that how it should have happened? That's what I'm trying to figure out when people say like this should happen, because I agree that it should, but when would be the best time for that to take place?
I guess I'll answer it by saying this. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I was Mike Brown signing a contract, a 4-year deal. And it sounds like, based off of Amick's article, that this was a topic of conversation amongst candidates. I would not feel comfortable signing a contract when the general manager has 1 year left and basically being stuck in the exact same position that Luke Walton was in, or again, Mike Malone was in not too long ago. If I'm a seasoned veteran coach like Mike Brown, who this is probably hopefully not, but hopefully it's a long-term job for him, but this is probably his last major shot, I would be a little nervous about that. And if I were Vivek Ranadive, If I was the owner signing off on here's a 4-year deal for this much money, I'm committing all that money to a coach, I would feel nervous about doing that when I didn't have my general manager locked up as well. Like I think ownership recognizes the pattern, recognizes, hey, this hasn't worked twice. Why is third time going to be a charm? Like, so I think it just makes the most sense for all of this to be handled at the same time or as one, Kenny. Maybe it doesn't have to happen on the exact same day. But what surprised me the most about this article is the fact that there's not discussions happening right now. To me, that's absurd. Like if you're hiring this head coach, if you're committing to this guy with multiple years of commitment, I think you have to at least give some of that commitment to Monte McNair as well. To keep him on just a 1-year deal as a lame duck, I think it's just strange. It's just different. I don't know if you'd see it very many other places.
There's still plenty of time for those conversations to be had. You know,
Sure.
First of all, the second, not trying to stall Vivek out here again.
That's my job.
Yeah, that is your job. We did enough of that last week, but you talk about trends and things that might make Vivek a little nervous here. He did sign a general manager to an extension with the head coach that failed miserably, and he fired one after 1 year and another after 2. So
but
I feel like the chance to correct a lot of mistakes starts now. Even though if I hope there's some sort of contract extension done before the season starts. But also, if I'm Vivek, it's also like, no, show me what you got here during free agency, because right now you've acquired, like, hey, big ups for Domantas Sabonis. But we also landed Terrence Davis, Mo Harkless, Hassan Whiteside as a couple of our other big deals. So yeah. you landed your main guy. Let's see what we could do here. Let's see what we can work with here this offseason, and we'll have these discussions when the time's right.
Yeah, that argument honestly makes complete sense to me, and I understand it completely. Just like you could also include in the argument that, I could argue that Monte McNair has wasted his first 2 seasons. Like I could argue that. I don't think, maybe since the trade deadline on, he's really started to put his stamp on this. And then that leads into a further conversation of how much he allowed to put his stamp and basketball decision maker.
Matt's computer's really hating us today. I don't know.
Baby, don't you?
Matt, your computer is turned heel on us. It hit us with a steel chair. That's okay. We lost a little bit of what you said there, but I think I could pick you up where you said Monte McNair has wasted his first 2 seasons, or maybe not necessarily since the last trade deadline, but leading up to that trade deadline he has.
Yeah, I think you can make the argument that he has wasted the 2 seasons. So that makes a lot of sense. I have a hard time comparing McNair to Vlade in the sense that I think McNair has already shown in 2 seasons and in a couple drafts how much more qualified for the job that he is than Vlade was. And again, that's not exactly the highest of bars for him to come in and look at. I actually think there could be a positive spin on this as well too, guys, which is like, if Monty is under pressure, if this really is his last year, if he's going into a lame duck year, if the goal really is for the Kings to win right away and to make the playoffs and make that jump, like, all of us are impatient, right? The Kings fan base is impatient. They don't want to hear another, let's take 2 or 3 months of a season for Mike Brown and the team to get comfortable together. No, none of that crap. Like, they need to start winning right away. Like, the time, the clock is ticking. If this puts more pressure on McNair to make the moves necessary this offseason right away, if they're there to pull the trigger on him, I'm all for it. Now, that also, in theory, could open the door up for a save your job type gamble garbage move that ends up hurting the Kings. But based off of McNair's patient track record, I'm not too concerned about that. So I think there could be a positive to it too.
Nothing could hurt the Kings more than what they've already done. Like, nothing. Go take the worst contract in the league. Whatever. we didn't bash on Luka Doncic. We didn't not make the playoffs for 16 years. Like, what you gonna do to hurt me?
That's scar tissue, baby. Scar tissue.
But what you mentioned, Matt, that's a great point. And this is where Vivek or whoever you want to say is making the decisions. Maybe it's Alvin Gentry advising now or something like that. You got to understand people and what conditions they perform best at. Do you believe that you would get the best out of Monte McNair when he's under pressure to save his job? Or do you feel like you would get the best out of Monte McNair when he has the security of knowing he's here for 2 or 3 more years. And that's, I don't know. That's the question Vivek has to answer, and hopefully he answers right. Because whatever it is that's going to get the most and the best out of Monte McNair, that's what I think he should do. If he feels like putting Monte McNair in a situation where he's got to show and prove and he doesn't get an extension and that's going to get the best out of him, by all means, let him be a quote lame duck GM. But if you feel like we're going to get the best production out of him by making sure he has the security and making sure that, you know, he's got that, now he'll be motivated even more knowing that he's here for the long term, then you sign him to a deal as soon as possible.
Do you guys remember a time, I honestly can't remember a time where like the lame duck year, that final year of the contract wasn't as significant as it is brought up in conversations now? Because it's funny how you sign a 4-year deal. It's essentially a 3-year deal and some change. And the change is, all right, you got to make a decision right now because this is my final year type thing. It's never, you rarely see the full length of contracts played out unless in like a player's scenario, kind of like the Domantas Sabonis situation. Sounds like it's going to make more sense for him to let his contract play out and then test free agency and probably get more money that way than if you were to sign an extension. But when it comes to front office members and coaches, it's like, now once I get to that final year, like if you don't commit to me right away, then you're setting yourself up for failure. We got a problem. So I understand your point completely. I don't think, like I said at the beginning, I don't think McNair deserves an absolute like get out of jail free card. Like just because you finally hired your head coach or you just hired Mike Brown, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to have an extension fall in your lap. But I still think if McNair is put to the test and he fails and they go through this again, I think they're going to be in a whole lot worse of a situation than if they were to extend him today and he struggle. I think it's way more worth the risk of giving McNair the years than rolling the dice with another GM search in the same coaching situation.
You're listening to D'Lo and Casey on ESPN 1320 KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by last year's Elk Grove Dodge. Matt George, host of the very popular Locked On Kings podcast, with us here. There is an alternative that Kenny and I spoke for just very, very, very briefly about earlier, and it's maybe Monty's holding off. Like, hey, let's hang on a little bit. I mean, everyone, if you choose to believe everything you read, there was a big power struggle for the hiring of the coach, right? All of the meddling, all of this stuff going on. Maybe it's again just throwing ideas out there. Maybe it's Monty who's like, no, we'll get there. Let's slow down. Let's go slow. Let's take this slow. We don't need to. We don't need to jump into bed together. Let's slow down here a little bit and see what happens. Let's get to know each other.
Can you imagine if that information ever came out, though? Like Monte McNair chose to step away from his first and possibly only GM job because it was the Kings. Like, that would be such a great story. I'm sorry. I would love that. I wouldn't, but I would love it. Like, content-wise, it would be glorious. So
it's about the one thing that hasn't happened here.
Let's do it.
We could literally check every box ever if we're it's not you, it's me.
I'm good, fam.
That and winning. Those are the two things that haven't happened.
That's very true. At least not recently. Is there any chance, and I'm pulling this question straight from the chatty house, do you think there's any chance the Sacramento Kings give Rashaan Holmes a shot to run it back next year, perhaps with a clearer head and a more defined role?
If his value isn't what they think it should be, then yeah, I think that's it. Like, I mean, he's going to be.
In other words, they'd be stuck with him.
Yeah, essentially, and it feels kind of unfair to say, because if you're stuck with Rashaan Holmes, there's a hell of a lot worse players in the NBA to be stuck with. Like, sure. we love Rashaan. We know what Rashaan can bring. Now that injury prone kind of label is starting to catch up with him a little bit, because I think we had the conversation last offseason, guys. If Marvin Bagley wasn't around, would fans have started to get frustrated with Rashaan? Because even though he was a bargain contract, Rashaan's been hurt for healthy chunks of every season he's been here in Sacramento. I don't know how much of it's his fault. Like, he got raked in the eyes 7 times this season, the poor guy. Yeah. Plus the off-court stuff. But like, I think Rashaan's going to be heavily shopped, and I think Rashaan has value. Now, I'm realistic. I don't think Rashaan straight up is going to get you John Collins or anything like that. But I think if we say the Kings end up with the 7th pick, I think the 7th pick in Rashaan Holmes can get you something fairly decent. It might not be an NBA starter, but I think you can get a damn good role player or two that can help the Kings win basketball games. So, but if Monty is putting Rashaan Holmes out there and these off-court issues or his injury history is lowering his value to the sense that they won't get a player that is better than what Rashaan can provide in a limited bench role, then yeah, I'm okay with holding on to him. His contract is still good too.
So and I'm not completely against that either, because like I said, during the end of the season, I feel that team with Sabonis that they had, they would have that team all year. I think they would have been better. I think they probably would have got into the play-in situation. So I'm not completely against it. But if you take Rashaan Holmes off the table, now you're getting into a territory where you're looking like you're probably just going to bring back essentially the same squad, maybe a draft pick, maybe a free agent here. And I don't think anybody's going to be happy with that.
I agree.
I think the fans, the general consensus of the fan is like, you're just going to run this back. Because at that point, if you take Rashaan off the table, your only real asset is the pick in Harrison Barnes. And that's still solid, but I don't know what kind of offers you're going to get for that either.
What I think you're hinting at, KC, is like, I don't blame Monty necessarily for not making bad moves, but it is fair to, it's a results league. It is fair to blame a general manager if he can't make any moves or can't get anything done. So if McNair tries to shop Rashaan and the right deal isn't out there, well, then you got to find a way to make the right deal elsewhere, or that's it. Like, just because the value out there for Rashaan maybe isn't as high as he wanted, and if you choose to hold on to him, but you choose also not to do anything else, because maybe same thing happens with Harrison Barnes, and for the most part, you do run this team back with maybe a small free agent signing or two, like a day 5, day 6 free agent signing, and then a rookie 7th overall pick. Like, what is the peak of that team? The play-in again? Like, maybe hosting a play-in game? Like, you're right. You're 100% right. That's not good enough, and fans aren't going to accept that, and nor should they. That's why I think the pressure of McNair being on a contract year maybe forces him to take a little bit of a risk with a Rashaan Holmes thing. Yeah, it's not the ideal, absolute, we are the winner in this deal trade, but okay, I think this player can work. We're trading away a player that is part of our rotation and someone who is now behind our star or one of our stars in Sabonis. Yeah, we're going to roll the dice here and take this risk. I think that's where Monte McNair has to be instead of playing it safe at this point in time.
Yeah.
Let's not turn our nose up at hosting a play-in game. That's like a 7 to 8. That's
I'm not
traditional playoff spot.
No, I understand, but I'm saying if that's the peak of this team, then how likely are they to reach their peak? I'm not, if the peak of this team, if they go into next season, they solidify their starting lineup and we know their peak is if they play their absolute best, they'll be a 5th seed. We can never identify that, but let's just hypothetically. Then if they don't play up to their peak, they can still host a play-in game. Or like the Kings, this Kings team coming into last season, their peak was to make the play-in and they fell very, very short of that. So if they had Sabonis all year, I think I agree with you, Kenny. I think it would have been high. They'd have a lot better of a chance to make it. And they probably would have made it. But, you know, I've been surprised before.
Hey, man, I ain't going to lie to you. I'm not even going to lie to you. Kings hosting the play-in game. The McQueen is flowing. The Luke Belair is being popped.
The Patrick Beverly tears are being shed. Believe that. It all makes for a great podcast, the Locked On Kings podcast. What'd you say the next one that you were the one that you're about to drop? What is that on again?
Dropping tonight. It's going to be like if the Kings were to win number 1 overall, if they make a selection, which players make sense, or if they trade the pick. The question I threw out there, and I'll ask this guys to you guys as well. What is if you're trading number 1 overall, what is the worst star you're willing to take back for that deal? Like who's at the bottom of your list to kind of gauge the value? For me, it was like, and I don't think, by the way, I don't think or know if either team does this, but for me, like if I'm trading number 1 overall with the assumed value of number 1 overall, the bottom of my list star talent player is like a Brandon Ingram or Jaylen Brown.
Oh my God.
I don't think I ever get them. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's so hard to trade number 1 overall. So is the bottom of your list lower than that? Because it's higher than John Collins, right? Like D'Lo and I discussed, it's higher than John Collins. So who's at the bottom of your list of, yes, I would accept that for number one overall?
I think we'll have to answer that when we return. Thanks
for the content.
That's gonna bug me. Matt George, producer extraordinaire, just planned our next conversation. Check out the Locked On Kings